So I wanted to talk to y'all today about why I have, for the most part, stopped carrying Band-Aids. I don't like Band-Aids, especially because of where I live and the things that I do and the people that I work with. So I have a few issues with Band-Aids. First off, they very rarely are this exact size and shape that you need. So a lot of times it's tough to fit the wound with the Band-Aid that you're given because it's just a small rectangle. So you have to carry a huge wide variety of Band-Aids. The next issue is that I live right now where I am is really hot and humid, and I'm doing a lot of physical work. So if I have an injury that I need to cover and protect and keep from getting dirty, the likelihood is that that Band-Aid won't stick. Either it won't stick to begin with, or as I keep sweating, it's just gonna come off, and then my wound is unprotected. Maybe it's like rubbing up against a piece of, clothing or something. The other issue with Band-Aids is that they go bad pretty quickly. The adhesive doesn't last for very long, so after, even if you don't use them, if they're just sitting in the box, after a year or so, they lose their stickiness. Yet another reason not to use them is a lot of people are allergic to the adhesive that's on them, and they have a skin rash. So that's also a downside. You may have an incident where you need to be able to get to that wound and clean it out regularly. Maybe it needs to be protected, but you also need to be able to let it air out or clean it. The downside to a Band-Aid is that people tend to avoid removing it because it's painful to take one off. Lastly, Band-Aids don't really fit the curved bodies very well. So if I have an injury, say on my elbow or my knee or my finger, the Band-Aid, as I articulate those joints, it either pulls on my skin or it puffs away from the joint, right, from where the injury is. So with a few exceptions, I do sometimes carry finger Band-Aids, because if you have a cut on, if you injure the tip of your finger, it can be nice to have something that's made to fit that. But beyond that, I don't carry Band-Aids. So let me show you what I carry instead. So this is my med kit. It is in a dry bag because I am in a marine environment. My med kit is actually in a toiletry travel bag. I have a hard time finding bags, med kit bags that are organized the way I want. And so this one is pretty small and compact and fits pretty much everything that I want, and it has really good organization. So I'm pretty happy with it, at least from for a more minimal, couple of day trip, it does fine. So instead of carrying a bunch of Band-Aids, I have Steri-strips for bigger wounds that that I feel comfortable closing. So I do have, so instead of Band-Aids, I have this stuff. Ooh, there's a bug on me. Okay. So I have this stuff, and I'm not sure what the real word for this is, but I grew up riding horses and we call it vet wrap. So this stuff is super cool. So it is stretchy and it only sticks to itself. And if you're really in a bind, you can reuse it if you have to. You can also cut it in different widths. So I always carry trauma shears. So I have my trauma shears. I can cut this, once I wrap it, I can cut it to length. I can also cut it to width. So if I have a finger injury, I can cut it narrow enough to deal with that finger injury. The other thing that I carry, so this isn't all that you need. I also carry non-stick gauze. So I hate it when I have a pretty big injury that I need to protect, and the gauze that someone uses, let's say I use someone else's med kit, they only have gauze that sticks to the wound. Well, then when you need to clean it or switch the gauze out, you've got this gauze stuck to you, and you're reopening the wound every time you change the gauze. So I buy this stuff. This is non-stick gauze. It's really great. And it's nice because one of these big pads, if you don't have a really big injury, it'll last. So I just literally just rip it open and cut the piece that I need, right? Like that. So now, let's say, if I had an injury on my leg, I can cut it just the right size for that injury. So I would take I like to use my dry bag as a surface to put things on. So I recently actually got a cut at work and was bleeding on my shin, and I was really sweaty and I had work pants on, and so I needed to deal with the blood because the blood was, I was bleeding like onto my boots and onto my pants, and it was just not, it was kind of gross. And my pants were rubbing up against that wound, and my pants are like full of sawdust and sweat, so I needed to protect it. So I could cut this little piece of gauze. I guess I'll do it over here so y'all can see. So I just cut this little piece of gauze like that and put it over the wound. And then you can cut this to the width that you need, and you literally, you just wrap it around there a couple of times, not too tight, and then you just cut it and you're good to go. And this is gonna, it stays in place really well, and it's flexible, it's not uncomfortable, and it's not gonna, my pants rubbing up against it and me sweating, this is gonna stay in place. So it's really great, and you can, you know, you can use this around different joints. So if I needed to go over my knee, you know, I can treat this the way I would treat an ACE bandage and go, you know, across and then do an X. So now I'm gonna go, you guys probably can't see that. So if I'm doing a joint, you know, I can wrap in this way, in a way that it's gonna stay. Whereas normally trying to get something to stick on a knee, it's just not gonna work very well. So then, since I didn't use this and it's very clean, I'm gonna rewrap it and put it back in my med kit because I can use it again. So this enables me to make a dressing that's gonna fit and be comfortable, easy to check in on the wound without, you know, the discomfort of pulling a Band-Aid off. I just really love that wrap. So what if you need a dressing that is waterproof? So in some situations, like being in a marine environment, you do need waterproof bandages. So I do typically carry 𝘬𝘕 and this benzoin tincture. So this piece of 𝘬𝘕 is a transparent occlusive dressing. So basically this is waterproof, and it lets the wound breathe, but it doesn't let water get to it. And it's not, it is sticky, so the downside is that, you know, you're gonna have to take this off and ruin it to clean that wound or check on that wound. But it is waterproof, so if you have an injury that you really need, like let's say a student cuts themselves here on the beach, I clean that wound out really, really well, but then they've got to get in a kayak and paddle, you know, to another location where we're gonna go to the doctor. I need to keep this water out of that wound. And so how I'm gonna do it is with 𝘬𝘕. Now, or a transparent occlusive dressing, I think is the other way to put it. So sometimes they don't stick very well. So this benzoin tincture, you just crack it and put it around where you need the bandage to stick, and it holds really, really well. Like it really makes those things, the skin stick to the dressing. So what I would do with this is I cut a little piece of gauze and then put this over it. So that's what I typically carry. So instead of Band-Aids, I have a system that's much more versatile. I can cover really big wounds on, you know, big joints. I can, you know, cut all of this a lot smaller and put it on something like a finger, which is really great because then the person can still use their finger and that bandage isn't just constantly falling off. So get rid of your Band-Aids and get some vet wrap and some non-adherent gauze.